This video is sponsored by Voodoo Ranger IPA, reminding you to live rangerously and drink responsibly. May the beer always flow and your dice rolls be ever in your favour. Don't forget to check out the free virtual D&D games brought to you by Voodoo Ranger during all 9 days of PAX Online, starting this Saturday and running from September 12th through the 20th. Check out the PAX Online Discord server for more info.
The Settlers of Catan, or just Catan, by Klaus Teuber is a game for 2 to 4 players in which you compete to gather resources and build the biggest settlements on the fictional island of Catan. A game as old as time, there are still plenty of people who haven't played this board game classic, and if you're one of them, here's how to play Catan! The board in Catan is actually modular, meaning it can be put together in a number of different variations, so the more you play, the more creative you can get with how you put it together. For your first game of Catan, however, there is a recommended way to set up the board, which you'll see right at the beginning of the rulebook if you have one handy. Otherwise, here's the overview. First, assemble the frame by clipping together the blue edges of the board. Once you've got the frame, you should place down the land tiles in this formation. Once the land tiles are down, you can place the numbered circles as shown. The rubber pawn starts in the desert. Choose a player colour and take the 5 settlements, 4 cities and 15 roads of that colour and place them in front of you. Place 2 houses and 2 roads as shown here. Each player should also receive a building cost card. This will remind you of what resources you'll need to build further settlements, roads and cities, as well as buying development cards. The longest road and the largest army cards, as well as the 2 dice, should be placed alongside the game board. Separate the resources into piles of their type: sheep, wood, brick, ore, and wheat. For the beginner setup, you take the resources of the land surrounding the settlement marked by the white star, so if you're yellow, you receive a sheep, a wood, and a wheat. Red gets a wheat, a wood, and a sheep. Blue gets a brick, a sheep, and an ore. And white gets an ore, a wood, and a sheep. Your turn is split into 3 phases: resource production, trading, and building. Before you do anything else on your turn, you must roll the 2 dice. The result applies to everyone and usually means you get to take a resource from one of the resource stacks depending on where your settlement is based and the number rolled. For example, red rolled a 9, which means they receive a sheep this turn as their settlement sits on the corner of a hex that produces sheep. White is on the other side of that same hex and will also receive a sheep. There is another 9 on the board too, up towards the top of the board, and yellow sits on the hex here and receives a wheat. Every player needs to keep track of their own settlements and whether or not they receive resources on any given roll. Catan is a game of probability to a certain extent, as the resources that come up will be determined by the dice that are rolled. 7, the most likely number to be rolled with 2 dice therefore, is treated slightly differently. If you roll a 7 on your turn, you get to activate the robber. Any player that has more than 7 resource cards in their hand must return half of them rounded down to the resource stacks, and that includes the person who activated the robber. You now get to move the robber onto one of the numbers on the board, covering up that number for another player or players and stopping them from gaining resources if that number is rolled. As they are the robber, they get to steal a resource from the player they're blocking. If you're blocking more than one player, you must choose just one to rob. There are 2 types of trading in Catan: domestic and maritime. Domestic trading is just a fancy way of saying you can trade with other players. You announce what you are after and what you're willing to trade, and other players can make counter offers and proposals. But not to each other. This is your time. Maritime trading doesn't involve the other players and can be incredibly useful when your opponents are being particularly stubborn. Maritime trading allows you to trade 4 of one good for 1 of another. So I could give these 4 sheep back to the bank and take 1 brick, for example. If you have a settlement or a city on a harbour, you get a rebate of some kind, like being able to trade at 3 to 1, or sometimes even 2 to 1 for a specific resource. The last part of each player's turn is the building phase. You can build as much as you like on your turn as long as you have the resources to pay for it and the building materials in your pool. Building roads costs a brick and a wood. Roads are placed on the edges of hexes and will allow you to build settlements further afield, giving you an opportunity to gain more resources. The first player to have built a road at least 5 long, not including forks, receives the longest road card, which rewards that player with 2 victory points. If another player's road exceeds the length of that person's road, they get to take that card from them, and so the longest road card is never entirely safe in anyone's possession. Building settlements requires a brick, a wood, a sheep, and a wheat. Getting settlements on the board quickly can be quite an important strategy, as each settlement is worth 1 victory point and you need 10 victory points to win the game. You can only ever place a settlement somewhere that is connected by your road, and you need to be at least 2 spaces away from another settlement, even your own. Apart from giving you a precious victory point, each settlement will also give you resources if the number next to it is rolled. This new settlement will earn me a brick when someone rolls an 8, and a wood when someone rolls a 3. Building a city requires 3 ore and 2 wheat, and an already established settlement. A city in Catan is like a hotel in Monopoly. It's an upgrade. You can only build a city if you already have a settlement on the board which you can replace it with. Each city will give you double the resources and is worth 2 victory points. Buying development cards is also part of the building phase and costs a sheep, an ore, and a wheat. It's a bit of a lucky dip, as you're buying blindly from a stack of cards, but they're all beneficial to you. Development cards are kept hidden from your opponents until a certain point, depending on the individual card. It's important to note that you cannot play development card on the same turn that you've bought it. All instructions are written on each individual card, but to give you a general overview, there are 3 types of development cards: Knights, Progress cards, and Victory Point cards. Knights are similar to the longest road card in that you will receive a 2-point bonus card for having the largest army for the first player to have 3 knights played in front of them. But just like the longest road, this card can be stolen if another player's army is larger than yours. Knights also activate the robber, in which case you behave as if you've just rolled a 7. Progress cards vary, and what they do is laid out very clearly on each card. They usually give you resources, or allow you to build without using any. Once played, the card is removed from the game. Victory point cards are among the juiciest of the development cards, as they help speed up your road to victory, and are to remain hidden until you have enough victory points on your turn to win the game. They're also the only development card that are allowed to be played on the same turn they were purchased. The aim of the game is pretty simple. First player to 10 victory points wins the game. Make sure to keep track of your victory points and your opponents throughout the game by tracking the buildings they have and any largest army or longest road bonuses. So now that you know how to play the game, go give it a whirl. And don't forget, the board is modular, so once you've gotten the grips of the basics, you can chop and change it to keep it interesting for everyone. If you enjoyed this video, there's plenty more Dicebreaker content available to you, some of which should be popping up on the screen right about now. You could also head over to Dicebreaker.com for some editorial content, for lists, reviews, interviews, and more. I hope to see you here again soon. Have a lovely day.